Welcome to the Everyday PM podcast, the podcast where we discuss project management principles for your everyday life. My name is Campea. I'm a certified project manager. I also come with experience in various industries, including healthcare, tech, marketing, you name it. I think I've had an awesome time experiencing being a project manager in any of those industries. I'm currently the VP of Project Management and Operations over at TrueSense Marketing. I'm so excited to welcome our very special guest, Kory Kogon, who is FranklinCovey's Vice President of Content and Senior Consultant, as well as the co-author of Project Management for the Unofficial Project Manager. Kory, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Anne, for having me. It's a delight to be here.
And I wanted to obviously dive into the details of not just the book, but of your professional journey. But before we get started with today's conversation, why don't you take a brief moment to introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you for that. And again, like you said, I've been with FranklinCovey for, hard to believe, almost 18 years now. Time has flown. And I bring, I guess, my claim to fame is I bring an executive on the street background to FranklinCovey. So been around the block around executive leadership, project management, all those kinds of things, and having the opportunity to blend all of that with the principles of FranklinCovey has been a gift. You might tell from my accent, I'm born and raised in New York City, but I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I've held many positions around training, project management, sales, and here we are today, working on lots of things around leadership, project management, sales, etc. So it's just a delight to be here. And this book has been really unbelievably successful, a surprise to us as how important it's been for unofficial project managers. So real delight to be able to talk about it today with you.
Yeah, and our audience, is project managers, non-traditional, traditional, whatever you want to call it. So I think what was most attractive to me about the title, even the title of the book, is you speak about project managers, but unofficial project managers, which, in today's world and kind of coming up as a PM, a lot of us fell into project management accidentally, unofficially. And so I appreciate that you've provided that viewpoint, not just as a part of your book, but it sounds like as part of your professional journey as well.
That's true. I like to say that I'm a scarred unofficial project manager. I previously was the executive vice president of worldwide operations for a global franchise organization, and coming up, in that organization, just doing these big projects like implementing ISO 9000 globally and a worldwide learning management system. You don't need to be an engineer or a PMP to do that. You just, in this day and age of knowledge workers, where we're paid to think, innovate, and create and execute, we're asked to do these big things and don't realize these are projects. And along the way, without having a little extra knowledge, we push our way through and we get the job done, but with a few scars, unless we know just a few things that really make a difference.
Let me ask you something, because I'm curious. You said you took on a lot of these projects, and at some point, was there an aha moment where you said, wait a minute, all of the things I've been doing on these massive projects that I've taken on exemplifies all of the skills that are being looked at for a project manager? Was there that moment where you went from, I'm an unofficial project manager, to, wait, I'm actually project managing this project?
There were a couple. I sort of knew early on that it was, I knew it was a project, but I didn't have knowledge really of the official processes of project management, PMI, and all of that. The most interesting one, I know this will be a little surprising but relatable for people, is when I was doing this implementation of ISO 9000, and my boss, who was the CEO of the company, kept saying to me, Kory, are you sure should we get a consultant to help you? Because, all these pieces are going to come together and you're going to sort of get crushed. And I'm like, oh no, I've got this, kind of. And I didn't. And that day came where I got crushed, and he almost lovingly fired me. He didn't. But that was a big aha, that I finally was paying attention to the fact that there were systems and processes in place that could make my life easier. And then, as the years went by, particularly at FranklinCovey, sort of understanding and learning more about official project management, and the understanding that you can distill things from that to put into play in our day-to-day work started to rise to the top for me. And being that scarred from that episode, I was all about looking for, how do I make things easier? Because this is more of my day-to-day job than I thought.
Yeah, I hear you. By the way, ISO 9000, for those that don't understand the massive complexity of a project like that, Kory, I'm just in awe that you said, don't worry, I got it, because that's a big project. But I think, going along the lines of you hit some of these bumps that eventually made you look further into, are there foundational things from a project management perspective that I can start to capture as part of how I manage these types of projects moving forward? Can you share some more of those pitfalls that you see happening as, folks do take on these unofficial project management type roles and that type of work, some of the other pitfalls that they might see? I know that personally, I've had to take my bumps as well just to get those experiences under my belt.
Well, the interesting thing is, and for whether you're a small business or a medium business or a large business, so I'll go back to what I said before. We are all many of us are knowledge workers paid to think, innovate, create, and execute. Excuse me. And we've slipped into this role. Sometimes we're not even aware of it. And so wherever I go around the world, I'll ask the question. I'll say, hey, let's brainstorm. What are some of the challenges of projects? And the same things come up over and over and over again. No, goals aren't clear, or the objectives aren't clear. We don't have good communication. Scope creep is, a favorite one. And we get this list of failures. Why do projects fail? That is consistent. I could be in Rwanda or Dubai or the UK or the United States.
Yeah.
I have gotten the same list every single time. And it's become normalized. So a lot of workers, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, if you think about it, we don't have project manager on our business card or in our signature on our email, but most of the work we're doing has a beginning and an end. It's a project.
Right.
And so, but we wake up and we go to work, whether you're the leader or you are on a project team, and you're like, okay, there's not going to be clear objectives. There's not going to be good communication. We're going to have the wrong roles for, et cetera. And it's just become normalized. And the cost of that is overwhelming. I mean, overwhelming, until people realize, wait a minute, all those challenges or why the project failed, I can do something about it. So it just sort of comes upon us versus this consciousness around, oh my goodness, I'm unofficial. It's like, no, wait, I'm unofficial. I didn't realize it. And there's something I can do about it and make people's lives better by minimizing some of these failures or reasons for failure that just have become normalized.
Yeah. So did you find, as you started to pick up on these trends, that it helped kind of frame your perspective on how you wanted to manage projects through start to finish?
It does even today. And again, you don't have to go. I have all the respect in the world for, project management professionals, PMI, and the other organizations that certify. But it governs. I don't always get my way, and it always doesn't go right. So I like to consider myself a laboratory rat with this stuff. But I am always thinking about and using the principles of project management processes to govern, even today, how I work a project or am part of a project, to try to make my life and other people's lives, easier.
Yeah, and I don't represent PMI, so I share the same sentiment as you. As you look at PMI as a governing body, and they try to put out publications and other ways, frameworks like agile, hybrid methodologies, waterfall approaches to help guide project managers. But essentially what you're saying is true. It's, you can only get so much from a foundational perspective, understanding the principles. But when you actually get into the work, that then becomes just you as the unofficial or official PM to just figure out what you need to do to overcome and navigate some of those challenges. And I want to say that's part of the reason why I loved reading through the way that you've written this book with your co-author, is because it is practical. It really does get into, you can tell that yourself and your co-author have been through that grind, have tried to take the principles and apply them in the ways that make sense for your business. And so for those who haven't read it yet, I think there's a lot of value in just reading it from the perspective of people who have lived through what we've lived through as project managers and are trying to take some of the standards and things that PMI is out there promoting, but also understanding that that's not going to solve the challenges that you have to navigate. It's just going to give you a little bit of structure, a little bit of guidance on how to maybe get there and be successful.
Yeah, and we're endorsed by PMI. So, I mean, people can take our courses and they get credit for that. So we used, I mean, the principles now with, even with, PMBOK, which is their guidance, we're always on top of that. Moving from 6 to 7 is when we updated the book and updated our course and stuff like that. It's just taking those things and distilling them down into something usable for somebody like me who's out there, working on things with beginning and end most of my career.
Yeah, agreed. And would you say there are any differences in the skill sets that unofficial project manager should, try to practice on a day-to-day basis versus somebody who is in an official titled project management role?
I think a lot of the skills are the same. I mean, so, our process, if you think about it, is, there's 5 steps. We need to scope the project. We need to plan the project. We need to engage the people. We need to track and adapt the project, and we need to close. So you can tell we took pieces of PMBOK 6 and 7, and we sort of have this blend of waterfall and agile. So it's interesting because you sort of do some of these things intuitively, and because when we scope I mean, you can think about a big dinner that you're making or a holiday dinner. You need to plan it, you need to scope it, you need to plan it out, you need to engage people to help you, you need to track everything, and you need to serve the dinner kind of thing. So it's interesting how intuitive this is, and how whether you're an official project manager or an unofficial one, you are institutionalizing or making really conscious these skills. What I will tell you, and really is brought out in the book, is 2 other components besides those things that are sort of skills, but one of them is that the process doesn't work by itself. That we say, that the mindset, which is where we start with skill development, the mindset of a project manager, whether you are official or unofficial, is that it is value plus people plus process.
Yeah.
So particularly, and when we talk about agile and waterfall, agile meaning we're just more in tune with, are we really providing value with the end product versus finishing a product only to find out that it didn't meet the original scope. That's as simple as, making that definition. But the key to doing that is not the process. It is how a project manager is leading the people that are part of the project team. And that is a major skill, because whether you are a functional leader with actual direct reports or a matrix leader, which is mainly what projects are, the goal defines the team really in a project. You need to lead with and be skillful in what we call informal authority. You can't say you have to do it this way, or you're going to be, it's like, I don't report to you. It's how are you inviting people to want to play on your team and want to play to win. That is a skill. And that's where we get into talking about the 5 behaviors. Out of all the leadership development things out there, if you can just master the 5 behaviors that are in the book, you will go a long way in making people feel like they'd like to work with you and like to get the job done, which makes everything much easier. That's the real skill.
Kory, are you willing to dive in? Obviously we don't want to give the whole secret sauce of the recipe to the audience. I definitely want them to pick up the book and read it, but do you want to give an overview of those 5 behaviors for the audience?
I'd love to. And again, remember, a really important thing is, and I'm sure some of you will relate to this, a lot of people that are running projects made conscious decisions to not lead people. And in organizations, there's a leadership track. Sometimes they call it a genius or a technical track, because I'm like, no, I'm not into leading people. And they lead projects, but then they end up leading people anyway.
Yes,
right?
Very true.
And so that's why I say there's a ton of leadership development stuff out there, including, FranklinCovey. It's what we're known for. And for us as unofficial project managers, what we decided was, let's just distill down sort of what I was saying. And this comes from Stephen M.R. Covey's work, if you know the Speed of Trust body of work out there. He says there's 13 behaviors of high trust leaders. We narrowed that to 5. Here's the 5. You need to, and they sound easy. It's like, well, my parents taught me this. But when you're under pressure,
yes.
It's tough. And again, I hate to stereotype myself, born and raised New York City, I'm an executive. So you can imagine, I'm very direct, I'm to the point. And so I could be abrupt, and I could put people off possibly if I'm not careful. I've had to work on that my entire career. 5 behaviors. First one, demonstrate respect. Again, saying, hey, just do it because I said so isn't going to work for you. It's not going to, it's not going to invite somebody to volunteer their best efforts. You need to listen first, as we say, and you need to clarify expectations. And we don't mean clarify expectations of the project. That's different. I've seen this happen where somebody will say, hey, why am I doing this task on the project? And the project leader will say, don't worry about it, just do the task. You don't need to know. And you've turned that into a task that they just want to punch in, punch out. You're not getting anything extra from them, versus saying, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Here's the purpose of your task in the bigger picture. And again, I know we're on borrowed time. There's so much research on people needing to feel purpose at work and how vital that has become. Anyway, so clarifying expectations of how each person and their job fits into the bigger scope of the project.
Yeah, love that.
Extend trust. Again, I could go on about each of these behaviors. Extending trust to others. You have to delegate out the work and not do everything yourself, or they need to feel like you trust them. They'll give you so much when they feel trusted by you. And then finally, practice accountability. First of all, you need to be a model of accountability. So you need to stick to your commitments, but it's an and, because first and foremost, you need to model accountability. You have to hold people accountability, and you have to learn how to do that in front of other people respectfully, and how to do it to get the job done. Because if, Anne, you show up to the meetings late 3 times in a row and nothing happens, then I'm like, hey, I don't need to, I'm going to go, take my kids to school, because there's no repercussions. Right. So, but holding accountability without embarrassing people, and doing it in a way that's very professional. So those are the 5 behaviors.
And they tie in so beautifully to what you said before you went into the overview, which was this idea around value and the project manager's unofficial or official understanding how you can drive even the concept of value add of the project to the team, to the organization. And I think that, coupled with these 5 behaviors of you as a leader, is really kind of digging into all of the elements that come into play if you become an unofficial project manager and are trying to figure out how to navigate being successful in your role. I think that's absolutely some of the secret sauce that we need to infuse into what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and also for official project managers, because we do a lot of times have official project managers in our groups and coming to us. And I would say to anybody that's on this call, they struggle. I'm making a big statement here. They tend to struggle the most with asking the right questions to get to the value prop. And more importantly, they struggle with the people side. So the last thing that they need to read about in this book is how to do a Gantt chart. They know how to do a Gantt chart. what they really struggle with, official project managers, is how do I engage people to do the work? And that's so this is not just the unofficial project world. This is across the spectrum.
And I would love to hear your perspective, kind of just to round out this conversation around, obviously you're an executive at FranklinCovey, you've written this book, you've got the unofficial, even official experiences as being a project manager throughout your professional journey. This all leads to, how can we be successful as project managers, titled or not? And what are the things we can do to help ourselves and our organizations be successful, but ultimately get that value back? So that's a long way of me asking you, at FranklinCovey, in terms of your role now and as an executive and knowing the things that you've learned having led these types of projects, what are some of the things that you've promoted within your organization or that you've seen be successful as a result of some of the things that you've captured in your book?
Great question. And I will continue to say that I'm a laboratory rat, and it's really hard. It doesn't always go the way I want it to go either. And I continue to work at it. And even right now, candidly, right in the middle of a project that is now paused. And if I think about a retrospective or lessons learned, I could have done, and it's a big we, right? It's not just me, but
yes,
we could have done or should have done a better job front loading. So back in scoping, how could we have done better? And sometimes you can't. It's only in the retrospective, which is an important part of closing a project, which we're not up to yet. But you always have to look at that and say, how could I have done this better to avoid this kind of pause, if you will, next time? So what's been successful is, again, making sure that you, first of all, have the right stakeholders and the right key stakeholders. And we go into that in the book. And by the way, the book is really a series of stories. Speaking of success,
I love it.
It's a series of 3 or 4, like you were reading a novel, in addition to the technical aspects. So it's not this heavy book, but you're going to see some of these challenges, and some of them are autobiographical. So when you see the story about, building out a new headquarters for a hybrid, work environment, that's from my previous experience as well. So like many authors, we bury our angst into, into what we're writing. Identifying the right key stakeholders is really key. And we give guidance on that because it's, what's obvious a lot of time with the signers, who holds the budget, and the CEO, whoever it might be. And we call it the key stakeholder dance. Who are the decision makers? Who has the authority? Who has the need? Those are obvious. It's the C and the E. Who has the connections and the energy? Because those are influencers. And sometimes we forget about the influencers, both positive and negative, right? So you have, so when you're looking at key stakeholders, and I have people out in the field that I have as influencers, because I know those that are going to be the negative naysayer, I say that with respect, kind of thing. So really important to make sure you identify all of the possible stakeholders. And again, it's like, this is going to take time. It's not going to take that much time, and it'll save you time in the long run. But any possible stakeholder, in order to then find your group of key stakeholders and not get blindsided down the road, which I think a lot of us have handled. So doing a really good job of that. And I'll go back to what I said before and what we do at FranklinCovey, asking really good questions. Why are we doing the project? What's the expectation? What are the goals around it? Really getting to the value of it is really key. I think that, and I think what I have to work on the most, particularly in an agile environment, because we write programs. So, training, learning programs. We're not doing software development, but this combination of waterfall and agile is a really important component of today's world. Tracking and adapting is really important along the way. How do you make sure you're hitting key stakeholder needs? And again, I'll be the laboratory rat here and say it's really important to be open-minded to making sure with key stakeholders and testing that you are headed in the wrong direction. Don't get so locked into the scope that it's immovable. That's if you're building a bridge, that's one thing, but that's not how we operate in today's world of knowledge work mainly. And I would say I always have to work at being open-minded to feedback and feedback loops, because I want to just go. And that's not, you have to find the sweet spot there. So I think we are good at that. That's a real key to success, and knowing where to stop that so you don't get into scope creep.
Kory, can I just say that I love how you responded to my question, because you responded to it in the voice and with the mindset of a project manager who is running their own self-reflection and retrospective on the work that they've done. So I think in the way that you've portrayed all of the skill sets, the capabilities, the support that you would need to be able to understand how to navigate being an unofficial project manager, in addition to the details and content of the book that you've now published and then updated to make sure that it's also staying relevant with, PMI standards. I think all of that to say you've shared just a wealth of knowledge with our audience today. And I very much appreciate everything that you've been able to share with us, your insights, your expertise, as well as the time you've taken out of your day to spend with us. So is there any closing thoughts from you as we wrap up our conversation?
Thank you for what you just said. I speak all over the world, and the last thing I want to do is be an imposter. So I don't want to get up and tell everybody what great leadership looks like and what great project management looks like unless I'm living it. So I'm a laboratory rat, I'm human. So it's cathartic. So I thank you, because it's cathartic for me to share, my journey of reality. And people respond to reality more than, you should be a perfect, person, doing leadership kind of thing. My final comment, project management is all the rage, even with AI. AI is not, there's a lot of, it's going to replace, there's statistics on, yes, it's going to replace X amount of jobs, but it's going to create even more jobs for humans. Everything is a project. Since the pandemic, everything has changed. New systems are being formed every day. We're making things every day, and project management is the place to be. So if you haven't tried it yet, give it a try. And if you're in it, take a deep breath, because it really is the skill set of today and the future as we continue in the new world of AI. But the human capability side of project development is key to all of that working really well.
Thank you, Kory. And please always look at the Everyday PM and our audience as your area to just be your authentic self, which you brought forward to us today. So we can be that group therapy for you if you ever want to come back onto the podcast and just have a real conversation around how it really feels to be a project manager, unofficial or not. And I look forward to, if you ever are planning to do an update to the book that talks about, how AI and PM is going to end up being kind of cohesive in the future. Again, you're more than welcome to come back onto the podcast to share your thoughts on that. So, Kory, thank you so much for taking the time with us today to share your insights, as well as share some of the context of the book. I'll make sure all of the links are dropped as we drop this episode so that folks can pick up the book and follow Kory, as well as any other areas that you want to promote, Kory. I'll make sure that those are included in this posting. So if folks want to chat further with you, can they find you on LinkedIn, or is there another place that they can connect with you on?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place. And if you want to learn more about anything FranklinCovey or project management, the book is in the regular sellers and www.franklincovey.com. So happy anybody reaches out on LinkedIn. I'm always glad to connect.
Fantastic. So, Kory, on behalf of our audience, thank you again for choosing this platform to share your insights on. If folks want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and Campea. You can also follow the Everyday PM podcast on any of your podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you name it, we're there. Just search for the Everyday PM. That will do it for Kory and I on this installment of the Everyday PM podcast. And until next time, take care.